and welcome back to Beyond the Trailer Park at another week. And of course, as always, my ladies join me this week from Pennsylvania. There, Beth. Good evening.
Howdy, howdy.
And from the wilds of Mississippi. Good evening, Miss Morgan.
Hey.
And of course, over there from wet and wild Seattle, bopping away to the theme music there, I noticed. Good evening, Bryce.
Hello, all. As always, thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure.
You're very welcome. And it's not 2 o'clock in the morning this time.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
In case you're wondering, a few weeks ago, Bryce pinged me at like 2:30 in the morning. He was like, so I don't suppose you'd want to do a show right now, would you? Like, sure.
You're very gracious with your time.
I was debating whether I was going to have a snack or go to bed. So do a show was, why not?
Way better answer. Gets your energy up and makes you feel alive.
Exactly.
Yeah, then it's time to go to bed afterwards and you're like wired for sound.
Well, I got to talk about Islam on a Mormon show, so that was kind of fun.
That's true.
That and I impressed Bryce with the story of Muhammad's mother's glowing vagina. So he didn't know that story.
So joyful, so glorious.
Oh, hey, and we got Triss over there in the chat. Howdy ho. So last week was a pretty heavy show because we were talking about Catholic child abusers, of which we keep finding out that there's more of them. Yay. But this week we're sort of kind of related, but a little weird because the last few weeks I've been seeing stories about how the Mormon Church doesn't want to be the Mormon Church anymore. and I remembered several years ago, probably close to 10 or 12 years ago now, when I was actually kind of studying Mormonism as a hobby online, hearing back then that they were trying to get people to stop calling them Mormons. And well, obviously that worked really well. So I was like, what the hell? What is this again? So I figured, hey, let's call our Mormon expert here and let's find out what the dealio is. So, Bryce, why the hell don't Mormons want to be Mormons anymore?
Well, there's a whole lot of headlines, which I think we're going to eventually be rolling around to, that paint the Mormon Church in a negative light. So we'll just not be called Mormons anymore. So much easier that way. Instead of dealing with the root issues that those headlines are about, rebrand, and move on. It's all good.
Yeah, it's rebrand.
But that didn't work the last time. So what makes them think it's going to work this time?
Well, I think that the prophet today is just trying to follow the inspired direction of the original prophet of, the church, Joseph Smith, because in his 14 years, he rebranded 3 times, and it seemed to stick for the last one. So, yeah, and it's sort of distanced the early Mormons away from bad headlines talking about them. So maybe he thought that this time would be the same as back in the 1800s.
Because we just won't remember.
Yeah, right.
They have a Men in Black division with one of those little gizmos to just wipe memories.
I want that reboot.
Yeah.
The Mormon in Black.
Yes. Yeah. Tommy Lee Jones, Will Smith, back again.
They wouldn't let Will Smith in.
No. This would have to be Trey Parker and Matt Stone.
Yes. Oh, God, yes. Oh, the best parody ever.
Yeah, Triss says in that case, Catholics should change their name too. I've been trying to tell Catholics that they need to not be Catholics anymore, but they don't want to listen.
They're a lot older than Mormons, though, so I think they might be a little...
Okay, there is that. Well,
believe it or not, there is a distinction being made just recently, and I don't know who exactly to attribute this distinction, is that we are the Roman Catholic Church, not the Catholic Church.
I've heard that where like people will say that like they're Irish Catholic or they're Roman Catholic or something like that, and I'm like, I don't think there's a difference.
I'm like, okay, is it the same? Is it the same fucking Pope? Then shut the hell up.
Well, they're trying to distinguish between Vatican-controlled Roman Catholicism and the fact that in the early days, I mean, going way back to the beginning, the Catholic Church was considered the universal church. And
the church.
The church, or known in Mormonism as the Whore of Babylon.
That's right, the great and abominable church.
Yes.
Yeah,
I want to be the Whore of Babylon.
I know. Sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, that whole Illuminati scam, whatever you want to call it, that Whore of Babylon thing figures into this distinction, but it hasn't really been pushed forward. It's just every now and then you get a little breath of it, and it's usually, well, because of the news lately. But yeah, I forgot who it was who said, no, we are the Roman Catholic Church. And I think it was in response to Bill Donahue from last week, whereas what people, Donahue is not a Vatican Catholic. He pretty much anything PR Pope says he's against. But yeah, it's that distinction.
That's only because he thinks Frankie's too liberal.
Yeah. Yeah, that
I don't know is bullshit, but that's a
a lot of people think that.
Yeah, so I didn't realize that Joseph Smith had tried to rebrand the church in his day. So you, Mr. History, probably know, what did he start out calling it?
It was the Church of Christ.
Oh, which
Isn't that a thing now?
Yes.
There are
are
a bunch of Churches of Christ, aren't there?
Yes.
Yeah.
And some of them are linked to Mormonism and some are not.
Yeah.
So, okay.
So there's one church known today. The colloquial term for them is the Hedrickite religion, or the Hedrickite breakoff faction. And they are also known as the Temple Lot Mormons because they own the plot of land that the original temple was supposed to be dedicated, and they put the stones in the ground. They still call themselves the Church of Christ. And they say that when Joseph rebranded in 1834 to be the Church of the Latter-day Saints, that's when he departed and went into apostasy, and now they're following the one true religion. So,
of course.
The one true prophet every time.
Yes.
Everybody's always got the one.
By the way, who the hell is your prophet now? Because Monson died a while ago.
Yeah. Russell M. Nelson at the ripe age of 93 years old.
Oh, he's going to
Russell.
93?
Yep.
Prophet Nelson. So if your prophet's Nelson, we can walk around going, I had to.
Yes, it's perfect. Although he looks a lot more like
Mr. Burns.
Mr. Burns, thank you. Yeah. I mean, there are memes passed around the ex-Mormon subreddit of direct comparison that it's
damn.
Even with the fingers in the little temple form, it's amazing.
Wow, Prophet Nelson.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, and there's great ones that are putting him side by side to Walter, the ventriloquist Walter dummy guy. Looks exactly the same, with the folded arms and the frown.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah. It's great. It's so easy for us on the outside when the prophet satirizes himself by his own existence. It's so easy. It makes joking so easy about him.
And I mean, can you imagine? He's kissed church ass for 90 years to become prophet for what? Maybe a couple of years.
Oh yeah, if he's lucky, yeah. He seems nice and spry. I don't know what he is behind, anywhere other than when the camera's in front of him, though.
Munson was around for a while, wasn't he?
He was 06 to 18, I think.
I was gonna say because he became prophet when I was studying the first time.
Yeah, 06 or 08, I can't remember when he took over.
Yeah, it was. Yep. It might have been 08 because he wasn't the prophet right when I was first learning stuff. It was a little while after, so maybe it was 08. But I know he'd been around for close to a decade, which is pretty well lived for a prophet guy.
Yeah, they typically don't have that long of runs because it's a seniority rule. Whoever's been in the apostles the longest gets the next seat.
Yeah.
And usually they're in their 80s before they're called. And like, you wonder why the church leadership today seems disconnected from the younger generation. It's because the prophet of the church right now grew up during fucking reefer madness, right? Like he was a little boy when prohibition was still in effect. It's fucking insane that, oh yeah, he's a little disconnected from reality. Imagine that.
You think?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's fun to watch the crumbling happening though, because I think the younger generation more than ever realizes how disconnected they are and how futile it is to try and modernize the church. And they're like, fuck this. This church sucks. I'm not going to go anymore. I'm not going to give them my money. Oh, they're covering up a rape scandal at the MTC. Yeah, fuck you. You don't get my 10% anymore. It's
it'd almost be worse if it was like young people that at least had a lot of influence or that they were listening to, because then it would just be like, oh, well, this is the hip Mormon church. You know, it's like the youth pastor that wears his hat backwards and is like, Jesus was the coolest guy ever, you know. But yeah, so I can see where it'd be a little bit more insidious, because there are like some people that are like, Jesus is cool, like
Yeah.
So.
Jesus,
but a good point with the hierarchy being as old as they are. I mean, I think I saw an article relating to where they're saying basically the Mormon church is literally bleeding youth.
Yeah.
25 under. I mean, they're just like.
There's a reason why they lowered the age requirements for missions, because they don't have enough people old enough that want to go.
And the whole story behind that is quite fascinating as well, because I mean, there was always this year to 3 year gap, and I say year to 3 year depending on whether you have a penis or vagina, of when you graduate high school to when you go on your mission. And what happens in that year to 3 years, you know, when you're a kid, what do? Do you go work for a year, or do you put off college? Do you go to a year of college or 3 years of college and then leave partway through getting your degree and go on your mission and then hope that your credits transfer over after your mission? What do you do? So instead they're like, let's just cut out that whole guessing game and make sure that none of these kids, when they graduate high school, are going to go to one of those damn atheist liberal colleges. And
like BYU. That bastion of progressive values.
Yeah. I was stunned to find
as I might guess this backward and then I apologize. He would like to have top surgery, and BYU is saying if you do, you're being expelled. So progressive.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You were shocked to find out what?
That there is a Mormon liberals Twitter handle, and apparently it's an organization. I was shocked, I tell you, shocked to find out that was actually a thing.
Liberals, so they're okay with hot chocolate and not coffee.
They're okay with coffee.
So progressive.
No,
so
actually,
woke.
they're not cool with coffee. Never mind. No,
that's
a little too far down the.
No, that's my interpretation of a liberal Mormon. They drink hot chocolate. But Triss is like, is that why the quote elder missionaries I've met are young enough to be my son?
Yeah, yep, that's it.
Yeah, and I was wondering that because you don't get a lot of Mormons around Mississippi. So kind of got that area covered with different other denominations, particularly the Baptists. So Yeah, and they do say that nobody wants to get sent down to the South because, it's just so heavy already with like Baptists, and they'll like want to debate them and stuff like that. And it's like these old Baptist women. Yeah, I have so many people who's like, my grandma debated them and was like, you need to read the Bible. And so, yeah, it's that. But I was approached by two girls, and I remember thinking, I was like, I thought they were just dressed in like vintage clothes, because I remember thinking, I was like, it looks a little old fashioned, but I was like, maybe they're just like dressed up in these cute vintage clothes and that's their style or whatever. But they looked a bit younger, like they were high school kids. And I was walking my little corgi, and then they approached me and they were like, hey, we're having this concert. And I was just like, okay. And then they just go, it's about Jesus, bye. And they hand me the flyer, like stuff it in my hand and like run away as if like I was about to pull out a gun and shoot them or something. And I'm just like, oh, okay. And then I saw it was like the Church of Latter-day Saints, and they were doing some kind of concert, but it was all the way up in like Knoxville, Tennessee, which isn't like
Weird.
close to me. But I mean, I guess in the grand scheme of things, I guess that's the only place where they have a congregation big enough to throw a concert. But it's very, very strange. And I mean, but I also do have a former Mormon neighbor, but she was a Mormon back when she lived in California. So, and then she moved here. But yeah, so I don't see them very often, but I remember thinking that was very odd. And I was like, I've never heard of girl missionaries, like, because occasionally we'll get a few people on the bikes and it'll always be dudes. But I was wondering if it was just like they couldn't get recruits, or if they were just like relying more so on girl missionaries, or what the deal was with that. Because I thought they were like, don't let girls outside, they'll go fuck or something.
That's why you send them on the mission, right?
That's why they're in pairs too.
Well,
like
fucking pairs. You can do that.
They wouldn't think of that, apparently.
Well, they're not the whore of Babylon.
Nope. Leave that up to the Catholics, damn it. I mean, come on. Have you ever known somebody from a Catholic school?
Yeah.
I have a reputation. I'm just saying. So
dovetailing off of that, actually, one of the apostles even said that that sister missionaries are 3 times more effective as the brother or the elder missionaries. So
why the hell aren't they everywhere?
Well, because most of them get married before they turn 19.
I know. That's more important for them to spit out spirit babies. I know. But,
every time. Yep. If you have a choice between mission and then going to school or getting married, it's every time getting married. You know somebody for 6-8 weeks? That's plenty of a dating period prior to engagement. That'll be fine.
You did a mission, right? As long as you did a mission, it's all good.
Yeah, he's got to be a return missionary. And if she didn't go on her mission, it's because she's going to get married, or she was waiting for a missionary to get back from his mission so that they could get married after the mission, or whatever the case may be. Like, a mission is a last resort for basically the women who don't get swept up by return mismissionaries before they turn.
What is it they used to say, that sister missionaries were really sweet in spirit?
Yeah, they're sweet spirits.
Yes.
That's some shade.
Yeah. Morgan gets it.
Yes, that sounds like a southern insult. Like, that sounds like something my grandma would say. Like, she's sweet in spirit. Bless her heart.
Hey,
Yeah.
I don't get it.
They're not as attractive.
Okay.
They're sweet girls.
And
they have a great personality.
Yes, they have a great personality.
Yeah.
Unless they're assigned to Temple Square.
I'm glad you said that. That is a very important point, that they definitely have these sister missionary roles. And one of those is definitely Temple Square. That's where people from all over the world go to visit the church and see what their temples are like, see what the people are like. There are companionships constantly just wandering Temple Square of the most beautiful multinational missionaries you will ever see. Russian and Japanese and all different nationalities there as companions, speaking broken English about how you can have eternal life. It's brilliant. It's a brilliant PR scheme.
And
Mhm.
so they put like hot girls who are like missionaries there.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Huh.
And you know that there's some dude who says, yeah, these sisters go to Temple Square. There's some dude somewhere up the line that says, no, these sisters, let's make them companions and we can just send them to Tahiti instead.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yay, patriarchy.
Extra sweet spirits.
Yeah.
So
needless to say, it's all a rebranding effort. There are some bad headlines
what
going
are they
on
going to
about
do
the
with the
Mormon
Mormon
Church.
Tabernacle Choir?
And that reveals how hasty this was, right? Because there are so many bad headlines. If you type in Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.org, it redirects to Mormon.org. They have 800 plus episodes of their own daily podcast. It's the Mormon Channel Podcast. They have all of these hundreds of videos on the Mormon Channel YouTube channel. I mean, they did this. They spent back in, I think, 2011 or 12, they launched this I Am a Mormon campaign, and they made these super high quality videos of like just talking to people about being Mormon. They have like mormonsandgays.org. They have all of these Mormon branded things, and without and changing any of them, without like rebranding any of them, just the prophet comes out and says, we are no longer called Mormon, and LDS isn't acceptable either. And their own official websites are mormon.org, where you go chat with missionaries, and LDS.org, which is their official church website with all of their ensign articles, with all of their scriptures, with all of their news headlines, their Mormon newsroom.
I missed the we're not LDS either part. What's his objection to LDS? The same thing.
They don't want people saying they are LDS. They want people who saying that they are members of the Latter-day Saint Church. Well, and also like this foreshadows what's coming down the pike as well, because the church is putting out a new 4-part history book series for the church that they swear this time these history books are going to be fucking honest. Every other time, we've there have been some controversial subjects that we have chosen not
if
to
it
deal
has
with,
an
but this time
entire
it's honest.
chapter on the Mountain Meadow Massacre, I might be somewhat.
I'm sure that they'll deal with it obliquely. But I mean, that's really not much of an issue for me. What I am viewing this as, I have sitting up on my shelf up here the 7-volume set, the Dan Vogel edition of the history of the church.
Okay.
And that spans from 1805, the birth of Joseph Smith, to 1844, his death, right? 7 volumes of these massive books that are, cresting over 400 pages each. This new history series of the church that's called Saints, foreshadowing Saints, is 4 volumes that deals with the entire history. So volume 1 is going to go from 1815 to 1850. Volume 2 is going to be the second half of the 19th century. And then the other 2 volumes will be the 20th century.
That seems like a little underwhelming.
It seems like they're going to have to leave some shit out, aren't they?
I think so. So.
But the title, I think, lends a bit of foreshadowing as to what they're going to try and rebrand with now. It's just that they didn't rebrand anything else. It was just like, you can't call us Mormon or LDS anymore. We shouldn't call ourselves that anymore.
So it's
that's it.
Saints Tabernacle Choir.
Saints Tabernacle Choir, yes.
You know what? I think the Catholics should file copyright on them.
That'd be amazing.
We've got a bunch of posthumous miracles that contradict your damn websites.
Yep. Oh,
hey,
shit.
I need legal work.
Hey, there's a job for you, Morgan.
Yay.
Class action lawsuits, Mormon versus Catholic.
Oh, yes. Oh, I'll file an amicus brief. Let's call them Mormonite instead. That's a way better word.
Mormonite. Is that like Marmite? It's equally as sour.
I just find this rebranding so...
It's asinine.
Yeah, I mean, especially in light of what's going down. I mean, yes, we all know about the Roman Catholic Church scandal, but a lot of people, and this is intentional, and you can thank the churches for this. Mormonism has their own scandal. JWs have their own scandal, not just in the U.S. This is worldwide. But as Bryce was saying before we got started tonight, no, or was it might have been you, Morgan? I can't remember which now. But nobody knows about them.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Yeah.
Like for me, I generally, because these are civil cases, I don't generally follow the criminal cases. Of course, the Roman Catholic scandal has kind of sucked me in, but it's still ongoing. And I'm not saying the abuses within the Mormon Church and J-Dubs aren't still going, but you don't hear about them as frequently as general Protestant churches and the Roman Catholic Church. And I think from Mormon perspective, they're trying to shove it even further under the rug.
Oh yeah.
It's like we rebrand and take that step back. We can distance ourselves even more because they have a case. It's a civil case ongoing now, and there's a lot of legal mumbo jumbo going on. The judge is supposedly an adjunct professor Brigham Young University by the church, and he's a judge, and he has before him the Mormon Church wants this lawsuit dropped.
Yep.
So there's a lot of legal wrangling going on, and I've only precursory followed it because it's a civil case. I'm more interested in the criminal cases and not to dish on any of the victims. But when you have people, saying, "Oh well, Christianity is the higher moral standards," and I'm like throwing out cases left and right, and it's like you are. But yeah, I think especially with Mormonism, I think a lot of this rebranding has to do to try to bury that even more. And I think as a secular community, we can't allow that to happen.
Yeah. Now, I'm sort of only very cursory aware of some of the stuff going on. Now, you mentioned the issue that went on in the Mission Training Center. Do you want to expound on that a little bit?
Yeah, this is exactly what Beth is talking about. So this is a current lawsuit that's going on with the church. And I want to be very clear that this is just the most prominent and public suit that's happening currently with the church. There have been dozens of others since 2000. For example, I went on when this story, and what we're going to refer to this story as McKenna Denson v. Bishop v. LDS and LDS, right? So what happened, this woman, McKenna Denson, was in the Missionary Training Center in Provo in the 1980s. And she was allegedly assaulted by the MTC president at the time. And this guy had a known history by the church, a known history of being a sexual predator, and they did nothing to protect this woman. And she became a victim of this guy, allegedly, Joseph Bishop. And I have to say allegedly every time because it hasn't been proven yet. So what has happened now is when this story broke in March of 2018, this blew up. And I personally went on and crawled the internet for every sexual abuse lawsuit that I could find concerning the LDS Church since 2000. And I think in 2 afternoons of just crawling every website I could, I found more than 20 of them. And in total, unfortunately, when it comes to all of these are settled. There's only, I think, 1 or 2 exceptions where the cases actually went through and anybody suffered any legal ramifications, and then policies were changed and had to pay out. But the vast majority of these are settled with NDAs, and nobody knows what the amount of money is that was ever paid out in settlement.
Yeah.
The dollar figures that I could find attached out of the more than 20 cases, I think I only found 8 or 9 of them that even had dollar figures attached to them. And all of those totaled up, all of them tallied up, was over $2 billion that the church was being sued for. Those are the initial filings. And now obviously settlement charges are much lower than that. But that was only a totaling that I could find of the ones that included dollar values.
Wow.
So, and the majority of them did not include dollar values. So there's kind of an interplay of like the lawsuits were more than what the actual settlements were. The filings were more than the lawsuits were, the settlements paid out. But I could only find the numbers attached to a minority of the cases. So there's no telling how many hundreds of millions the church has paid out just since 2000. Possibly
Yeah, settlements are usually they're closed, and that you can't like go back. You can't usually go through, like, even me. If I'm working as an attorney, I can't go through and find these settlements because they're usually they're sealed, especially in these kind of cases. And usually they make you sign an NDA also as part of your settlement agreement, and you have to be like, yeah, and then also you have to like waive any liability. So basically, it's a legal document that says the LDS, we don't have any liability for this, but here's your money. That way they can't bring another claim.
And also, you can't ever talk about this ever again. Yeah,
it's fairly common, but right now there is a trend that's sort of been against that. I think it's we saw that with Bill Cosby, because that was supposed to be under seal, but then in the interest of him being a public figure and such, the judge decided to release that. So yeah, I mean, and there is also, I've seen where certain state legislatures are starting to talk about maybe making it to where victims of sexual assault cannot be forced to sign an NDA and cannot be forced to shut up. So awesome. I think I've seen where California is starting to look at doing that, but I haven't seen it really gain any traction. I haven't seen a bill proposed, but I do know that these state legislatures, they are talking about possibly doing that, because NDAs usually, the idea is that you use it to keep people from disclosing things like trade secret or something like that. Like if you work at the Coke plant, you can't tell everybody what's, our secret formula or whatever. Right. That makes sense. If you go work for Google, you can't like just go work for Uber and tell them about how they did everything. But there's been a trend sort of, and I think it's disturbing a lot of judges and a lot of attorneys, that they're being used more and more to sort of cover up this bad behavior. And then you end up with these predators who, they have all this money, they have all this backing, and they're able to do it again and again. And I actually did look up this case, and this judge, Beth, the judge actually was a Bill Clinton appointee. And he also, he was kind of skeptical of the church's claims when they said, well, she should have brought this claim, back in the 80s and she should have just figured out that the church was part of this cover up. She should have just figured that out somehow. And the judge was like, how would she have known? How the judge hammered the LDS attorney on that point and said, how the hell, basically, I mean, he didn't say it like that, he's a judge, but well, I can't be a judge. How the hell was she supposed to know, that the church was like, are they informing her? Hello, miss, like, we're covering up our crimes. Like,
well, Oh, no, it's so much deeper than that too, because she tried to talk on multiple occasions to authority figures. And they said that we have handled it, and you are not privy to the information of what has happened in the discipline of this guy who allegedly assaulted you. So they were telling her that we handled everything on the back end, and she never got any filing for it until after the statute of limitations.
Yeah. And see, and this is why the NDAs are so damaging in cases like this, is that it prevents any type of passing of information. There was one case, it was fairly old by today's standards. I mean, it's going back to the 90s. And basically, they knew this priest was a predator, and he was not Catholic. The church did nothing for the most part, we disciplined him, yada, 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 passed him off to another church. He fucking raped again. And this was not children, by the way. This other church passed him to a third church. Gave him glowing, and the victims didn't find out that there were other victims after the fact until it finally broke in court. And because they all, because it was basically these NDAs. And what makes this case with the MTC so hot topic, so to speak, because the judge in some ways has done good, in some ways, from my perspective, questionable. But basically, this is from Desert News, and this was right after it was came to light. This was from March. Bishop adamantly denied the allegations through his son, Gregory Bishop, who questioned the woman's
fucking asshole, Gregory.
Who questioned the woman's credibility, saying she has accused, and I don't know if there's any truth to this, 10 other men of sexual assault, sexual harassment, or being filed, and has sought cash the victim. And I don't know if any of those accusations are true or have any truth to them, or but I'm saying, I mean, this is the low that, and this is a civil case. This is not a criminal case. So really the only thing at stake here is money.
Well,
they don't want to set a
Beth,
precedent, though.
Yeah.
What you're talking about actually runs another level deeper in how fucked up it is, right? So that guy, Gregory Bishop, he basically acted as the spokesman for his dad, Joseph Bishop, because the guy's in his 80s, right? Oh, he's senile. He, when the way that this story came to light was Mormon Leaks published the audio of McKenna confronting Joseph Bishop under the guise of being a reporter and writing a story about him. Right? And that audio got leaked to Mormon Leaks, not by her or her attorneys, mind you, probably from somebody within the church or from maybe one of her friends. It's kind of unknown, because that's the whole point of Mormon Leaks, is they provide transparency and encourage transparency within the church, whilst at the same time concealing their sources to protect their identities. So this broke, and then immediately the church compiled a dossier on McKenna Denson in order to assassinate her character. They sick the fucking attack dogs on this woman in trying to discredit her. And her credibility has not been reduced. They have, as of the time we're recording this right now, because of the statute of limitations, because apparently rape is okay if you're not prosecuted for it after 3 years or whatever the case is. The case was basically dismissed under statute of limitations, but the case, her lawsuit also included suing the LDS Inc., the church, for fraud allegations. And that was not thrown out by this judge. That is a very controversial judge to be having, to be presiding over this case. But it's interesting to note that did stand, and that they're still moving forward with fraud charges against the church.
Yeah, because of a reasoning behind that. There's a doctrine of latches, which, and then there's also doctrine of unclean hands. Doctrine of latches is usually, that applies to common law claims as well, where it's like, well, you need to bring this claim now because it prevents, because witnesses die, things like that happen. Evidence gets lost, it gets old, people can't remember, things of that nature. But there's also this doctrine of unclean hands, where like judges really don't like it if you've been attempting to conceal your wrongdoing in order to get around a lawsuit. And that is a great way to piss off a judge. So I think that might be part of why he's letting this go forward, because it's despicable to be able to do that, to cover up your wrongdoing so you get out of legal trouble. And so the law comes in and says, no, you can't do that.
Mm-hmm. I just, in my parlance, from a strictly, I just find, I haven't delved into this case because it is a civil case, but it's like, now I'm like, wow, this case is really bizarre. Because it's like, it's this tit for tat that's going on with the dismissal on part of the case, but they're letting part of the case through. The judge, okay, some believe he should recuse himself, but then he makes a ruling that totally refutes the idea of recusing himself. It's just really, it's kind of odd to watch.
Well, and let's add another layer of complexity as well, because when she initially filed, There were, well, this is actually a related incident in this case with McKenna Denson and Joseph Bishop. She filed a report with the BYU police, and the BYU police came and took her deposition, and I believe they also interviewed Joseph Bishop concerning these allegations. This happened back in the 1980s, if I'm not mistaken. And that information has not been made available. And Mormon Leaks, Radio Free Mormon, and KUTV News have all filed grandma reports with the BYU Police Department in requesting the audio recording from those interviews.
Is that like a freedom of information kind of thing?
Yeah, so grandma, I think, is regarding just specifically with legal, with criminal cases. Is that correct, Morgan?
Yeah, so it would be kind of like a freedom of information thing, but on a state level. So yeah.
So they filed for these the grandma reports to get that audio, and BYU denied it. But this information is under, this information falls under the Freedom of Information Act, and it should be released to any reporters who are filing for this. And instead, they filed a lawsuit against BYU in order to get that information released. A ruling came down that in their favor, not in BYU's favor, in the people filing the lawsuit's favor, and they ordered the information to be released. BYU appealed that information and is moving it up to, I think, the 4th District Court of Utah, or whatever the case is.
Of course.
Because they are trying to make the case that the BYU Police Department is not subject to the same rules as the state police department, because I don't know, because they're a private school's police force. I don't know what the rationale behind that is.
Okay.
But needless to say, the end result of it is they are covering up sex abuse. The BYU Police Department is covering up information that would lead to the conviction in a sex abuse trial. It's
the public interest alone, should outweigh that. Because that's what basically they've been. When people have been challenging these NDAs, because, and when you're settling a case, a lot of times you're not going to think, oh, well, I just want this to go away. I'm not going to ask any questions on if this NDA even is enforceable. And, we're finding more and more that judges are looking at these NDAs being like, what the hell is this? And throwing it out and these kinds of things. And so, and there is this heavy interest, especially when the media is involved, especially when it's a high profile thing like the Mormon church, who has a lot of money, a lot of power, a lot of influence, particularly in that region, and it's newsworthy. So a lot of times when it's those cases, they're going to be like, let them have it. And also BYU, they, just because it's a private school does not mean that they're allowed to do whatever the hell they want. Like, that's not a thing. They're still a police force.
If your campus police has the same powers to arrest people or detain people or all of that shit, they're a fucking police force. And if they have weapons, they have the ability to use weapons, they fall under the same category as any other police force. And something else about these NDAs that I was just thinking about from the victim point of view is it's basically telling the victim, well, we don't really care what happened. We don't really care if what you said is true. We're going to throw some money at you to make you go away. And you're not allowed to say shit because we don't care what happens to you. We don't believe you, whatever. It's a pat on the head. Oh, did you get a boo-boo? Oh, well, here, have some money and fuck off.
Yep. It's all about protecting their reputation. Yeah, because that's what matters to them. Because if this got out, people might start leaving the church. They might stop tithing. They might, it's all about, because you do this analysis, right? You're like, well, would it be more expensive for me to go ahead and go to trial and try to get all these claims, just kicked out on its face? Would it be more expensive in the long run for us to go ahead and settle it? It's really messed up, but that's what we do. An analysis we do.
And the level of, in some ways, the LDS church is extorting their members to pay for this, because
Totally.
this isn't like the Catholic Church where it's, yes, the Catholic Church will guilt the fuck out of you to give them money, but they don't have the same ability to extort it, because in the Mormon Church, oh, you want to see your child get married? Well, you better cough up all of that tithing, and that they do that every fucking day. Every day they do that to people.
Well,
And it's so much harder to say, well, do I give money that might get used to cover up sex abuse, or do I tell my child that, oh, I'm sorry, I can't go to your wedding?
no shit. Doctors Without Borders, people. It's way better charity to donate to. Well, and to add another layer of complexity, and I think this might dovetail into another subject of discussion we can get into, to exhibit how powerful and influential the church is in Utah politics, because Utah was constructed as a theocracy, and it has grown from that. It has never divorced itself from its roots, right? So it has just become barely secular enough to be able to pass as a State of the Union. But come on, it's a goddamn theocracy. So every political movement that happens, every judge appointment, every sheriff election, everything that happens in Utah happens with the implicit or explicit approval or disapproval of the church. So in March, or it might have been in February of 2018, there was this obscure House bill that came forward called House Bill 330. And I went on to opening arguments and talked about this because it seemed so weird, and it caught the attention of some of the ex-Mormon community, because it was at the time that the Protect LDS Children campaign was coming up, and more people were saying, when you go into an interview with your bishop, record that shit. Protect yourself legally, protect the bishop legally, protect the church, protect everybody by recording the audio from that. And people were posting that up in public fora, and making it available that people could listen to their bishop's interviews. Well, the Salt Lake City Chamber, and this is it's a private entity that is basically staffed completely by incredibly wealthy Mormons. They created this House Bill 330 that would have made Utah a dual party consent recording state, instead of a single party as it currently stands, where it's just you can record anything anywhere you are and not get consent from the other person to do so.
As
Which
long as
in case,
you or one party is aware that it's being recorded.
exactly. And in that case, at that time, the audio from the Joseph Bishop and McKenna Denson interview was in the church's hands. That was sent to them in December of 17. In January, end of January, early February of 2018, this obscure House bill in the very first session of 2018 gets proposed, and it was met with a lot of backlash. But that would have rendered, it wouldn't have, retroactively rendered that recording illegal.
Right.
It would just insulate the church and insulate anybody from being surreptitiously recorded in the future.
Kind of went, oh,
makes it easier to cover up.
That's going to fuck us over. Let's make sure nobody can do that again.
No shit. So, yeah.
Yeah, if they weren't doing anything wrong, you'd think they would be all for the recordings, because they would be like, oh yeah, this proves that we're in the right and we're not doing anything weird.
Interviews, there's nothing wrong with our bishop interviews. They're totally above board. So everybody, please go ahead, record them. You know what? If you don't have a recorder, we'll provide one for you, because we got nothing to hide. No. Oh shit. Let's prevent anybody from being able to do that shit. Whoa. No, we don't need that.
Yeah, it's like the cops and body cam thing. Is like, the good cops, they like the body cams because it shows they're doing right. But then, it's some assholes are just like, oh, well, I don't want the body cam because I don't want people to see what I'm doing, or I'm going to make sure this footage gets mysteriously deleted or something like that. So,
darn, it turned off right when that guy got shot.
Yeah, amazing how often that happens. But so that just shows that they are trying to cover up something shady, or else they'd be like, oh yeah, of course, we want to show that we're in the right here, and that
so
otherwise is lying.
Somebody people might not know what the bishop's interview is all about. I think we've probably mentioned it on a previous show at some point, but in case somebody's new to the whole Mormon thing, I know what it is, but Bryce, what exactly is a bishop's interview?
Well, conducted at regular intervals throughout Mormons' lives are these interviews with their bishops, and they're basically interrogations. They're couched as, we want to make sure that you're worthy to advance to the next level of the priesthood, or advance in young women's, or to be able to go to the temple. We want to make sure that you're following all of the laws and commandments of the gospel, and you are worthy to enter that, because no unworthy flesh can enter the temple. So these interviews are a number of questions are asked very explicitly. Are you honest in all your dealings with your fellow men? A number of questions that you think are, just typical Mormon things. Are you keeping the word of wisdom, not smoking or drinking coffee or whatever the case is? And then one of them is, are you keeping the law of chastity? And chastity in Mormonism is cis heterosex only after marriage. That's the only approved version.
And one spouse at a time. I should, yes.
Depends on the Mormonism, but we're talking the Brighamite tradition.
Sorry. In mainstream LDS, one spouse at a time.
Yes, totally. Mainstream Ziontologist.
Well, although I will say Esther from formerly the FLDS said that they're not into multiples either. So
yeah. I'm sure that probably varies between families.
Probably,
yeah.
But
that's a whole side rabbit hole. We'll have to do another time. But so these interviews are conducted in a way that they ask, "Are you keeping the law of chastity?" And the answer almost every time is yes, because if you don't keep the law of chastity, you confess about it to the bishop, who is then metes out a punishment for you of some kind, and they call it a repentance process, but it is a punishment. Or you lie and you say, I am keeping the law of chastity, and all of your problems go away. And then you enter the temple under false pretenses, and then you feel guilt and shame about lying to your bishop, because God knows the true intentions in your dealings and your honesty. God knows that you lied to the bishop, and the bishop has a power of discernment, and he actually knows that you were lying to him because he has a power of discernment. Therefore, there's even more shame and guilt, and all you really do is just touch yourself at night. But we can't have that, because that is expressing your sexual desires in a non-cis hetero married way. So that's unacceptable. We can't have that. So it creates a culture of sex and shame concerning sexuality, human sexuality. And that's kind of the crux of one of these issues.
Masturbation in particular is extremely frowned upon.
Yes.
And that is literally why Mormon missionaries are always in pairs. Like, they're not allowed to have a room to themselves.
You go to the bathroom with the door cracked open. Like,
yes.
Yeah.
Because you might enjoy wiping yourself too much, I know
it wasn't too long ago, and I'm going by memory here, but wasn't there a statement put out that the bishops needed to chill on their sexual questioning?
No.
I'm getting that backward. It was it ties into the LGBT issue, and I can't remember exactly how it went, but something where, I don't know if it was an actual lawsuit or a case that came out where the questions were inappropriate.
Well, most of the questions are inappropriate.
Yeah.
Like, what were they like? Describe your encounters to me, or whatever.
Exactly.
Bryce actually gave me a list here.
And actually, let's wait on the list, because I want to qualify this a little bit more before we get into the list, because it's important.
Of course. And how young are, 8 years old, right? Was when they start with this?
8 years old. And then you usually have a 4-year break until you turn 12. And then they're usually conducted every 6 months to every year after that. And for some of the harder cases, in air quotes, they are conducted much more frequently. If you happen to be a repeat offender of any of these.
So if you if you were under the mistaken idea that being honest would be a good thing in this situation, you would be targeted far more frequently.
Yeah, like maybe you're, as they would say, struggling with same-sex attraction, that horrible affliction of sorts. Then you would be interviewed monthly or every 3 months. Yeah, just to make sure that you're not fiddling around with anybody of the same sex.
God, I would have so much trouble.
Same.
Yeah.
I was my first girlfriend from age 14 to age 21.
Yeah.
That's why you fucking lie to your bishops. And you feel shame about it, and then you are always worried that your parents are going to turn you in.
I would never survive.
Well, and I've read stories from ex-Mormons where, you know, Bishop so-and-so suspected something about me, or they just, you know, they were bored and they hadn't gotten anything, you know, quote, juicy from anybody. And so they just decided to drill at me until I confessed to something, because they just got it in their head that you look like you're not telling me everything kind of thing.
Your jeans are ripped, or you look like you're wearing your shirt is a little bit too low cut. You might be tempting boys with that. Are you acting on any of those temptations? Like they use visual cues in order to inform their power of discernment, to decide whether or not they should probe any deeper into any of those questions.
And let's be clear here, bishops in the LDS Church are parishioners who get appointed to be this for a certain period of time, probably because they kiss the right number of asses.
Yep, and usually drive a nice car. Yeah.
So
let's be very clear. They have no formal training. They are not given any, they're given a pamphlet of standardized questions, but they don't have any counseling. They don't have any therapy training. They are not mandatory reporters by default in Utah, at least. And I mean, it varies by state, but in Utah, where the highest concentration of Mormonism exists, they're not mandatory reporters, which is even more goddamn terrifying. They have set up their own internal hotline if they suspect that somebody has experienced sexual abuse that happens to connect the bishop to somebody within the church headquarters, that then connects them to a lawyer and a therapist and gets them the proper help. And you can be sure that it's the proper help. And when I called Eric Hawkins, their public relations director, to ask him who that is on the other end of the line, for some reason he refused to comment. But there's no transparency about who you're connected with and where those calls go, if they're ever recorded or if they're ever filed with any of the proper authorities. It's a goddamn internal hotline. What do you expect will happen? Right?
Yeah.
So some of the guidelines here. So one of the main cruxes of these worthiness interviews is that they're conducted one-on-one behind closed doors with these untrained bishops. Problems? Think that might introduce problems?
It's just a little bit. And like I said, I've read some horror stories over the years of just unbelievably inappropriate behavior by these people. Well, men, they're always men, because you know, women shouldn't ever have authority over anybody, my goodness. But it's astounding the harm that these men are doing to people. And some of them, like reading the stories of the people that were given these interviews, these guys were basically taking notes to jerk off to later.
No shit.
Yeah, that's what the whole thing. It's like, oh, tell me about that experience some more. It's like, ugh.
Exactly. And it's like, oh, do you keep the love chastity? Obviously not, because you're gonna go home and wank to this.
Now do girls have to do this? Like, go in and do these interviews too?
Everybody.
Yep.
Adults do.
With adult men. So an 8-year-old girl will be told she has to go and sit through an interview with an adult male who she may only know their face from church.
One-on-one behind closed doors.
Yep, behind closed doors with no parent around, and be asked, do you keep the law of chastity? Like that child would have any fucking clue what that means.
Yeah. There are so protectldschildren.org. That's the whole campaign that is working to change these, and it works on 10 words. No one-on-one interviews, no more sexually explicit questions ever. 10 words to change the policy as it stands. They have collected stories, both named and anonymous stories. There are hundreds there. I have read through most of them. There are some stories there that are really fucking hard to get through, but there are also a number of stories, speaking to your point, Deb, that people said that I didn't know what masturbation was until I talked to my bishop. Of 8-year-olds, 12-year-olds who have no idea what the bishop is talking about when the bishop asks, do you masturbate? And they have to say, what does that mean? And then the bishop teaches them what masturbation is. Okay, so let's go to the actual guidelines that the church has set out, because they have said that these interviews are not required to be one-on-one. As the Protect LDS Children was coming to a head, and they held a march in downtown Salt Lake City. I mean, I was there in person. We marched and shut down downtown Salt Lake for 2.5 hours. It was great, but nothing ever happened of it, right? So in a week before that, they tried to take the wind out of the sails of the march, and they released these guidelines that said these interviews are not required to be one-on-one, but a child can request to have their parent or another adult in the interview.
What kid in that kind of authoritarian environment is going to be like, oh, hey, mom and dad, can like one of you come in while I talk to the bishop? And they're going to be like, are you crazy? Why would you want that?
Yeah. That, and also
not only that, the chances are they're not going to tell the whole story. Just like with having, like when you have family therapy, they do the children separately, they do each child separately, then they do the parents separately, and then they do a group. They never, because they want to get parts of the story.
Well, and if somebody wants their jollies, they're gonna wait till they can get the kid by themselves. But what were you going to say too, Bryce?
Well, and that kind of, I don't expect that any 12-year-old walking into a bishop's interview one-on-one knows the danger that they could be in if that bishop is a predator, right? They don't know enough about the real world to understand the level of danger that
they're taught that this person is a leader in the church, and they're taught that they're perfect for the most part. And I think they get the whole they're God's representative shtick too, don't they? I mean, they're members of the priesthood. They're high up in the priesthood. They can bestow blessings and all kinds of shit. Why would you doubt as a little kid what these men are supposed to be capable of doing? And you're taught that the church is perfect, and these men are appointed by the church. So why would you doubt them? Why would you even think that there was an issue?
Yeah. Why would you question the religion that you're a member of at the age of 12? Why would you do such a thing?
8.
Or 8.
Because I mean, 8 is specific, because that's when the LDS Church believes a child reaches the age of accountability and needs to be baptized into the church. Yep. So 8-year-olds are huge targets because they want to get them baptized and onto the church records so that they can, try and make them into good little Mormons forever and ever. And at very least count them on the membership rolls if they can. But yeah,
and it's also all like, your friends all go do that, your parents do that, everybody in your family does, so you just think it's normal. And that if that's all like, to us it sounds absolutely bonkers. I'm like, yeah, my dad would be like, an adult man does not need to talk to you for any reason. It's like he would have lost his mind. He would have lost his damn mind, and there would be like somebody dead. But because adult men do not need to ask little girls questions about anything. Like, But yeah, and but I mean, if this is all you know and it's so normalized, then you're not going to question it because you're just like, oh, well, my parents do this, my cousins do this, my friends do this, so everybody, it's just something that everyone does.
Well,
Yeah.
and let's talk about the guidelines a little bit because they have tried to soften this and make it and minimize the issue as it's been making so much of a kerfuffle on social media because that's where this movement has lived solely is on social media. The church released these guidelines recently saying this 5-page guideline list of how these interviews are supposed to be conducted. And in that guideline list, that's where it said that children can request to have their parents present or another trusted adult. But also to be clear, bishops are not trained to understand the signs of whether or not a child is being abused by their parent or something to that effect. They're just wholly unqualified. It creates all sorts of really fucked up issues. But what they do say in that 5 pages that I think is extremely crucial in understanding the context of these questions is the bishop may ask questions or may I'm forgetting the exact quote, but the bishop may create questions based on the church materials included with the For Strength of Youth pamphlet. Now, For the Strength of Youth is a pamphlet that is standard reading for kids going through the church. And the Strength of Youth pamphlet happens to have a section about sexual purity. Now, I want to read. Do you guys mind if I read a little chunk out of this For Strength of Youth about sexual purity?
Please do.
Okay. So I have spoken with, luckily for everybody in the world, when you log into Mormon.org, they provide a chat box as well as a hotline where you can call and talk to missionaries and ask them any sorts of questions you want. And this is the line of argumentation that I have walked through with dozens of missionaries by this point. When a bishop crafts questions based on the For Strength of Youth pamphlet, and this is what the For Strength of Youth pamphlet says, what do those questions look like? Here we go. Never do anything that could lead to sexual transgression. Okay, it depends on how you're defining sexual transgression. We can talk about that. Then it says treat others with respect, not as objects used to satisfy lustful and selfish desires. That's objectively good advice. Treat each others with respect. I think that's really good. Now we get into where it considers sexual purity. Before marriage, do not participate in passionate kissing, lie on top of another person, or touch the private, sacred parts of another person's body, with or without clothing. Do not do anything else that arouses sexual feelings. Do not arouse those emotions in your own body. Pay attention to the promptings of the Spirit so that you can be clean and virtuous. The Spirit of the Lord will withdraw from one who is in sexual transgression. Avoid situations that invite increased temptation, such as late night or overnight activities away from home or activities where there is a lack of adult supervision. Do not participate in discussions or any media that arouse sexual feelings. Do not participate in any type of pornography. The Spirit can help you know when you are at risk and give you the strength to remove yourself from that situation. And then this is, of course, this is where we get into another salacious aspect. Homosexual and lesbian behavior is a serious sin. If you find yourself struggling with same gender attraction the way you would a cold, or you are being persuaded to participate in inappropriate behavior, seek counsel from your parents and bishop. They will help you overcome that horrible affliction. So that is the material. That is basically the canon that bishops use in order to craft questions about sexual purity. When somebody responds no to the question, are you keeping the law of chastity? That's the material that a bishop uses to further question, to understand to what extent they are or are not keeping the law of chastity. So, thoughts, panel?
Yeah, a lot of that material sounds familiar to me growing up in a Southern Baptist thing. It's like, you're taught, or, even when I went to my crazy fundamentalist boarding school, it was like, oh, you can't ever be vertical with someone. Oh, don't ever hold hands. Don't ever view content that would ever make you think this way. Or, oh, adults are here to help you. So you can tell them about all this stuff. And then it's just like, no, you get treated like an like a freak. And then thankfully I was never dumb enough to like go and like be like, hi everybody, I'm bi. But you know, it's like I never was, you know, dumb enough to do that. But at the same time, it's just like this whole like, oh, the spirit of God's going to withdraw from you. So, you know, if you it's just like, and then also it's kind of victim blaming because it doesn't allow for any kind of thing where it's like, oh, I was sexually assaulted, so the spirit of God's gone from me.
Yeah.
And yeah, and so there's that element too, but then it's also like nothing about consent, nothing about any of that. And then on top of that, it's like, oh, and if you're, you know, a dirty whore, then God wants nothing to do with you. And yeah, that's an incredibly damaging thing.
Well, it's basically the Mormon version of the purity culture, and even Elizabeth Smart, the girl that was kidnapped.
She's spoken out against it.
And she's actually said, you know, I was taught that, you know, if I, you know, people asked her why she didn't leave her kidnapper, and she said, well, I was always taught growing up as a child that if you are sexually impure, you're basically a dirty rag and nobody wants anything to do with you.
Yeah.
So for years, this girl, now a woman, was horribly abused based on, you know, the Mormons' interpretation of sexual purity. And I mean, and the thing is, I find it interesting that they started at 8, not so much because that's when they baptize them, but basically the thought is if you don't get them before the age of 10, some even say before the age of 5, you're going to lose them as a parishioner. You know, they're not going to join your little cult, you know, and you see the same thing, like, you know, within, you know, like with Catholicism, you use it with the catechism class. Lutheranism, we have the same thing. We have, you know, we go through catechism. Our first communion, I think Catholicism is a little bit before ours, but that's like 14 years old. I mean, who at 14 knows anything enough to decide, you know? I mean, that's just, I mean, that's why the indoctrination, especially within the Mormon church primarily, and I do consider the Mormon church a cult, as I do all religion.
Same here.
But I mean, that's how they do it. That's how, you know, once they have these kids and you normalize this behavior, like Morgan was saying, getting out of it has got to be damn near impossible.
And wasn't there, Bryce, now I'm talking decades ago, but I don't remember if it was a prophet or an apostle or a 70, but one of those old fuckers said something to the effect of it's better if you're sexually assaulted, you're better off getting killed than letting it happen.
I was really hoping that would make its way in.
I remember these things.
Yeah. So there's this book that is basically mandatory reading prior to my generation. It kind of fell out of vogue along with the later blooming millennials, but it's called The Miracle of Forgiveness by Spencer W.
Kimball, that's the asshole in question.
Yeah, and I think that's where it's included. I never read it, but that book has done more to shape Mormon culture in the last 40 years than any other writing in the church.
That one, that sounds like the right one.
Yeah,
and I remember Kimball being a particularly assholey asshole.
Oh, Jesus. Yeah, fucking no idea. Now, granted, we should give him props because he lifted the priesthood ban. Yeah.
On the black people?
Yeah.
Oh, well, hey.
So
it's a real mixed bag with this motherfucker.
What's a few dead sexual assault victims now that black people have the priesthood, you know?
Yeah, totally cool now. But yeah, that was the crux of the point. Is it's better for you to die in defending your chastity than to lose your chastity. So fight to the death instead of getting raped.
And if you are and you survive, then it's your fault because you should have fought to the death somehow.
Exactly.
You better just fucking kill yourself instead. Yeah, because your life has no value.
But don't do that because that's a sin too.
You're already going to hell. Might as well go in style, right?
Look, that's exactly what happened to Elizabeth Smart. She thought, I'm a used up, dirty old rag. I may as well stay with this creep who abducted and continuously rapes me, because at least he apparently values me, even though I'm a dirty old rag now.
Yep.
Like, how sick in the fucking head is that?
At the Protect LDS Children rally prior to the march, there was a sex therapist or a sexologist who stood up and talked about this, named Dr. Mark Malin, who's been publishing on this for, I think, 40 years now, particularly within the Mormon community. And he quoted extensively from Elizabeth Smart, but exactly what you're saying, Deb, that she felt laying there on the ground, being actively assaulted, that her life no longer had value, that she was the chewed up piece of gum, she was worthless. And that is the entire crux of what he was talking about. Is, yes, these bishops' interviews that the Protect LDS Children program is trying, or campaign is trying to stop, they do open the door for overt sexual abuse to happen by a sexual predator that is in an authority figure, whether it's your MTC president, whether it's your stake president, your bishop, whether it's a member of the bishopric. It doesn't matter. It teaches a culture where it's okay for somebody to go into a room, for a kid to go into a room and talk to an adult about sexual questions. And it also creates this covert sexual abuse where it teaches shame, where you're taught to loathe these feelings of sexuality. That's kind of the crux of this, that it teaches these incredibly unhealthy perspectives of sexuality. And it makes it so you don't know where to go. You don't know where to turn when something happens. And people are like, people are talking about McKenna Denson. Why didn't she file, prior to the statute of limitations going up, why didn't she file with the proper authorities a complaint? Well, maybe because she was product of a sexually repressed culture and she didn't understand the extent and the real implications of what had happened to her. She was just allegedly sexually assaulted by a priesthood holding trusted authority figure within the church. And she was made vulnerable where she was in that situation because of these bishops' interviews, because of these worthiness interviews. Had they not been happening, had they been happening in a different way, had there been protections where she would not be allowed to be one-on-one behind closed doors, the overt sexual abuse wouldn't have happened. But the covert sexual abuse arguably is more damaging on a broad sense, because you're creating an idea of millions of people hating their sexual desires for no other reason than just controlling their fucking minds. And that, I think, speaks to what you were saying, Beth, earlier, is it's a fucking cult. When it controls your mind, when it controls the basis of human instincts of reproduction and sexual desires, and it controls everything that is approved or disapproved, it's goddamn mind control, and it's a fucking cult.
Well, and the thing is, and not to keep referring back to the Catholic Church, but this is the whole gist of not just the Catholic Church, but any of the Protestant religions as well, is controlling the sexuality, of their minions, and that's why they look down on whether you're gay, straight, bi, transgender, whatever. They can't, if they can't control that aspect of you, they've lost you.
Yep.
And it's actually written into I don't remember specifics offhand, but specifically written into the Catholic doctrine. And of course, being Protestants being an offshoot of Catholicism, it's trickled down, and Mormonism is, depending, on which way you consider it. Some can, classify them as being Christian. Some don't. That's neither here nor there. It's going to trickle into the church, and they've basically latched onto that.
Yep.
And I think what we're seeing with all these various sexual abuse scandals, we're seeing the fruition of that mindset. And, it's so ingrained in our culture, it's hard to battle.
And it's a cycle.
Yeah,
It's a cycle of, I felt this, I was made to feel this shame, I was made to be repressed, so now I'm going to make sure these people are, feeling these same feelings of shame and repression. And it feeds on each other, and it just creates this whole cycle that it's really hard to break out of.
And I think it's also important to understand the very granular mechanisms by which this control is exerted. And with Protect LDS Children collecting all of the stories, that's data. That is, it may be anecdotal, but enough of it aggregated together into this one location represents data. It represents people's experiences within the church. And they compiled 29 questions based on those experiences and what people explicitly were asked by the bishops. And you can read into the context of each of those questions just by the wording of it, who they were aimed at. So I think we should take a sampling of those. It's not too hard to read through all of them, but even just a few of them, I think the entire pattern and trend comes into focus.
I think we have time to go through them all.
Okay. Yeah. Do we want to go ahead and read those off?
I'm fine with that, because I think people should see just how disgusting this shit is. And this is, again, what was sent out to LDS clergy to as an acceptable list of things that you could ask your parishioners. Remember, starting at age 8 years old, about their sex life. So this is, from what I can gather, most of this would be if either they answered that they didn't keep the law of chastity, or maybe they were unsure about what that meant, or even if the bishop had discernment that the person was hiding something, whatever. They can ask the shit whenever they want. So we start off with, do you masturbate? Do you know what a vagina is? What were you thinking of while you masturbated? When was the last time you watched pornography? What type of pornography do you watch? Do you masturbate while you watch pornography? Where and how did your boyfriend touch you? So you think of like a teenage girl. Did you keep the law of chastity? And let's say she made out with her boyfriend last weekend, and she's like, well, I kind of maybe. And well, we got to delve into this. And he's asking, where and how did your boyfriend touch you? Next, we get to, were your nipples hard?
Oh my God.
Did you get wet? Where were his fingers? Where was your underwear? What color were your panties? Now, who the fuck needs to know what color the girls' panties were?
So they can think about it?
Exactly. They're writing their own fucking porn novels to read and whack off to later, while they're making people feel guilty for whacking off to legitimate porn. And then we get to, did you orgasm? Did you know that once boys reach a certain level of arousal, they have no choice but to keep going, that they can no longer stop their sexual advances?
Fuck that so much.
So they're teaching girls that after a certain point, you're just going to get raped.
Yeah. And it's your fault.
Yeah. Have you ever
made them aroused?
Yeah, because you made them aroused. Here's another one. Have you ever put your penis in another boy's anus? And if so, did you like it? Describe the sexual positions you engaged in. Like they need to know that. Did you engage in oral sex? Did she orgasm? Did you ejaculate? How many times did he ejaculate? Where did he ejaculate?
This goes back to a point that Morgan made. They're writing their own fucking porn novel to jack off to.
Yep.
You have to be. To want to know about positions and what color lingerie were you wearing and all this.
We're not quite done yet. Not quite done yet. Did you engage in anal sex? Did the boy ejaculate in your mouth? Did you put your mouth on her vagina or use your fingers? Did he touch your breasts? Did you touch his penis? Did he penetrate you? And this was asked to a rape victim. Did you like it? What did you do to egg him on? What were you wearing and did you orgasm? That was asked to a fucking rape victim. And these people think that this is okay. The bottom, this was written by some to apostles, which are like the second layer after the prophet guy. Mm-hmm. So these are the old geezers that one of whom will get to be prophet next time. So one of these wrote this to the rest of them. And at the bottom, he says, my apostolic friends, thousands of testimonials were delivered to your office on March 30th, 2018. At least one member of your quorum has read them all. To date, you have not condemned a single... Oh, this was written to them.
Yeah, by Sam, by the guy that's running the campaign. Yep.
The guy who's saying this is not acceptable. At least one member of your quorum has read them all. To date, you have not condemned a single question. I am left to conclude that you condone every one of these repulsive 29. Please let me and the world know that I'm wrong. With your love, brother in Christ, Sam Young. P.S. You can also see these questions in video. And I'm guessing that he never got a reply. No. So he sent this to like the how many? 12? Is there 12 apostles?
Yeah, there's 12 apostles and then 3 in the presidency.
Okay. So are the presidency above the apostles?
Yeah, so it's the prophet, 2 counselors, and then the quorum of apostles under that.
Okay, so the presidency is the prophet and his 2 goons, yep. And then we have the apostles. Okay. So this is, pretty damn high up there, and they can't even bother replying.
If I got sent something that crazy, I would have immediately responded and flipped the fuck out. Like, again, like, especially if it was like, oh, we've been asking like teenagers and children, this kind of stuff, much less it's already creepy when you're doing that to an adult. Like, even if I'm like talking to my closest friends, I would never be like, oh, what sexual positions did you do? Like, what is wrong with these? Oh God, it's just so freaking gross.
Especially like, in regards to the questions that are geared towards girls, it's like it tells you what they think of women.
Yeah.
You're a fucking piece of meat.
A rape victim. Did you like it?
Yeah, and exactly.
What did you do to egg him on? Like, go fuck yourself, Bishop asshole.
And I have to degrade this conversation even more because the reason these are asked is so that the bishop knows what level of punishment is merited given their previous actions, because there's always a clout of punishment that hangs over these questions and your answer to these questions. If you say, no, I am not keeping the law of chastity, then a bishop is basically forced to ask the depth of your sin to know what punishment you require in order to repent. And that starts with, you don't take the sacrament in sacrament meeting, which means that all of your friends and family sitting near you see that you're not taking the sacrament and they all know that you're being punished for something. Then it goes up to disfellowshipping and then to excommunication. And the number of rape victims who have been excommunicated and punished because of being raped is, well, once again, I will encourage people to go to protectldeschildren.org and read some of the stories for yourself, if you can get through them.
It's ridiculous. And you know who else punished?
It's not ridiculous. I'm sorry. It's fucking evil. It is disgusting. It is horrific. It is deplorable. It is breaking people's minds before they're adults to realize that their mind is fucking broken.
You know who else punishes rape victims? Fucking Taliban, fucking Saudi Arabian barbaric assholes.
Yeah. These are barbarians with an ivory tower and nice cars. Like, these are barbarians who live in Utah instead of Saudi Arabia, right? This is barbaric, antiquated, Bronze Age ideas of fucking sexuality.
We joke about porn shoulders, but that is the same thing. It's like, oh my God, you showed a shoulder. Some man is going to get a boner, and it's all your fault for showing your shoulder.
Yep.
Well, it as I said, it goes back to how the Abrahamic religions specifically treat women or treat people they feel are below them.
Yeah.
They have no respect for other people. And I mean, the Mormon church, I mean, with those questions, I mean, to an 8-year-old child, to a 14-year-old child. I mean, I came out when I was 5. I mean, I knew when I was 5 years old that I was gay. Okay. I didn't understand it until I was in my 20s. I just knew this was fun. It felt good. I never felt any shame about it because that's not, it never registered with me. But you're shaming children. All in the name of fucking God?
Yeah.
That's fucking pathetic. Whether you consider Mormonism a cult or not, or a Christian religion or not, they're getting their, quote, so-called morals from Abrahamic religion plus Joseph Smith.
Yep.
It's just, it's like Bryce said, it's barbaric.
And, the idea that getting people to stop calling them Mormons is gonna fix any of this shit is disgusting.
Yeah.
Like, how I don't care if he's 90 goddamn years old. What kind of a tone deaf fucking moron would even consider such a thing?
It's all about rebranding, because if you rebrand, then you can get people to disassociate you from the horrible things you've been accused of doing. Like, companies do this all the time. This rebrand. It's like, oh, we're not this industries now. Now we're, X Incorporated. And yeah, it's like they're trying to do the same thing to distance themselves instead of actually getting to the root of these problems and actually doing anything, because then it helps with that whole systematic cover up. I mean, they've been doing it this long. So if you keep covering it up, then you know what? Nobody's going to talk about it. No one's going to find out, and you're not going to be forced to change or deal with these hard problems.
And it reminds me of the whole Hoffman incident, because how did they get themselves into that mess? By trying to cover up shit about the church they didn't want people to know about.
Yep. And I've vacillated a fair amount with the impact of Hoffman and whether or not it was a good thing or a bad thing. And lately I've been considering it a bad thing, because it revealed and it further created a culture where the church feels like it has to cover up things of salacious aspects. If those were just whisperings and questions that were had behind closed doors, now they were something that was happening in every Mormon's house.
Yeah.
And this idea of protectionism was really thoroughly enshrined in the 1980s.
And if people don't know or don't recall, the Hoffman incident, Hoffman was a brilliant document forger in the 80s who created a bunch of fake documents that purported to be from the early years of the church, from Joseph Smith and other people high up in the church, that discredited a lot of the things that were originally thought to be true about the church. And his idea was make something that the church would pay virtually anything to bury, so that they would pay him shit ton of money and think that they've saved the church from some erroneous, or something they didn't want out. So what Bryce is saying is, he created this idea that there are things out there that the church needs to protect itself from, and perpetuated that idea and made it more real to the hierarchy of the church.
And that if you pay money, it goes away.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it did. it worked beautifully for them at that point, because he was more than happy to take any kind of money and give them what they wanted. And
Didn't he also make bombs?
yes,
Okay, that's what I was thinking of, because I remember it was happening at the same time as like the Unabomber, and there was like some, yeah.
I forget why he started blowing people up, because he was getting caught.
Cover up. Yeah, he was about to get caught. It was cover up.
Because there were enough people that were like, he got too greedy, basically, because he kept coming up with more and more and more and more of these, and people were wait a minute, where's this guy getting all of this like bizarrely rare stuff?
But what it did do, and it paved the way for what we're experiencing now in the internet age, is it basically created, or it didn't create, but it enshrined the need for New Mormon history. And New Mormon history is the more accessible and easily communicated Mormon history that people can identify with, that's supposed to be faith promoting, that's supposed to be, yeah, well, Joseph used a rock in a hat, but it so happens that that rock was illuminated by the gift and power of God, and that's how he was able to translate it. Faithful interpretations of controversial aspects within Mormon history. Because the internet came along a decade and a half after that, and information was now being accessed and being communicated at light speed, the pervasive ubiquity of more information way too fast that the church can no longer control is going to serve to be the backbreaker of the church. That is, and Beth, you said it earlier, that the church is hemorrhaging young kids. It's just bleeding them out of every single pore, because kids, the millennial generation, I mean, Gen Xers they know how to use the internet, right? It's only the baby boomers now that are disconnected from the internet. And
Hey.
it's like, Beth, you're not you're not a baby boomer. There's no way. No, really?
Yes,
Okay.
I'm the last year of the baby boomers. I'm born in
last year. You're very, very tail end.
Yes, I'm the very tail end of the baby boomers.
But I mean, I think it does reveal the trend that everybody your age and everybody younger than everyone on this call is now understanding how to use the internet and how to connect with people at fucking light speed from across the globe, and how to access document archives that have never been accessed before. And the church has no fucking way of controlling this.
Well, and that's why you'll see within a lot of the various sects where not sects, they forbid internet use or forbid having cell phones. Like, I have not a real super high Amish population and Mennonite population near me, but it's here. I mean, I'm 5 hours from Lancaster, but I actually watched a Amish boy. He was on a fucking cell phone.
Good.
It just totally. I love it. I wanted to say something, but his family frequents our sheets quite often, and he still speaks Pennsylvania Dutch, so his English is not. So I didn't want to say something like that would totally get lost in translation, but that's the thing. I mean, there was a woman. There's a documentary online, and I can't remember the name of it, but she's Amish, and she has like basically a halfway house, for lack of a better word, where she introduces this stuff to individuals that are leaving the Amish population. And that's the thing. You get these young people leaving the Mormon church, getting connected through the internet, and it is happening in the older generation, and it's anecdotal. My father's fucking.
Oops, she froze.
Oh. I mean, he just got what do you call it, an iPad. And I'm like, and he's telling me all this shit, and I'm like, Dad, I have no fucking clue what you're talking about, because I don't get into that. I mean, I have the bare minimum, but it's like the information age. I believe is going to be the death of the overall church, and wishful thinking that, in 10, 15, 20 years, the religion as a whole will be underground. If anything, could it possibly be eliminated? I think so. If these kids are as smart as they appear to be.
Look at what I learned in, oh gosh, maybe 7 or 8 months of reading stuff about the Mormon Church.
Yep.
I don't even remember what got me into it. It was just I had time on my hands. I had an internet connection. I'd been having fun yelling at Christians and whatnot, and I don't remember why it came up, but I thought, wow, this shit's fascinating. And I just dove hook, line, and sinker into it. And everything I could possibly want to know was on the internet. And this was 10 years ago, 12 years ago. I didn't read the Book of Mormon because I tried and I just couldn't. I needed David to read it to me. I'm sorry.
Yeah, there we go. That's my voice.
It was there. I could have read it, but instead I thought, well, who's going to tell me the real deal here? Ex-Mormons. And I found the ex-Mormon bulletin boards. I started reading. I never, ever posted ever because I didn't feel that was my place, but I wanted to learn. I wanted to soak it all up. And then I thought, well, I'm only getting one side of the story here. So let's go find some good, nice mollies on another bulletin board and listen to them. Soaked up everything. I'm like, holy shit, what the ex-Mos are saying is true. Look at that. Damn.
Yeah. Well, it's like I joke about when I first started questioning over 20 years ago, the internet as we know it now did not exist. I had bulletin boards and news groups. That's it. I didn't have what we have today. And I jokingly say, because a lot of theists like to throw Richard Dawkins as our prophet in the face. And I said, well, yeah, true. If Dawkins would have wrote God Delusion back in 92 through 96, when I was pretty much out of religion, it probably would have sealed the deal in 5 seconds flat. In other words, it wouldn't have taken me 10 fucking years.
Yeah. Well, and I keep thinking back to Mike Norton, who otherwise known as New Name Noah. And look at what he's been able to accomplish. And his sole impetus is because he's realized how many broken-hearted young people have gone through the temple on their wedding day, especially young ladies, expecting a certain thing and finding out just how absolutely impersonal and bland and industrial it is, and just not wanting anybody to go into that without their eyes open. That's all he ever wanted. Was he wanted to not have somebody disappointed on their wedding day.
Well, I want to pick up on something you said earlier, Deb, and I'll just share my own experience a little bit before doing so. When I was a member of the church, I left before I went through the temple, so I never experienced it. I never saw what it was like. There was nowhere I could go to see what it was going to be like going through the temple. I had only heard whisperings of what it was like from family members, but nobody ever tells you what it's like to go through the temple until you go to temple training classes. Or there are these workshops that you learn how to go through the temple if you're going through it your first time. And I thought it was crazy to think that you need to go through a class to learn how to go through a temple. But, I was, 11, 12 years old at the time. My critical thinking skills hadn't exactly flourished yet. But now there is a place where people can go, where if there's somebody questioning what happens in the Mormon temple, they can Google Mormon endowment ceremony, and New Name Noah's videos with 700,000 views come up, and they can watch it right there and see how fucking creepy it is. And what you're talking about earlier, Deb, going on to going into these ex-Mormon groups and hearing what they're saying about it. This book right here, this is Fawn Brody's No Man Knows My History.
Yes.
This book kicked off a revolution of Mormon history, and it was published in 1945. What took Fawn Brody a decade and a half to compile and put into that book now takes somebody like a Jeremy Runnels 20 hours of hard reading to compile and put together into the CES letter and then publish it. The access to information is so much faster, so much easier now. You don't have to go to archives anymore. You don't have to go and hold the physical copy of something in your hands and then write down on your own little notepad what it says anymore. That's not a thing. I mean, that obviously still happens for records that aren't digitized yet, but the number of records that are not digitized as opposed to how many records are in the vaults still, that list is shrinking every day. More is being digitized every day. And now this disparity of how history used to be conducted versus how it is conducted I really realized at this last Sunstone when I was talking to a historian of the old school. And when I was talking to this guy, he told me we were talking about old medical books, old 19th century medical books. And he said, you need to pick up a copy of Materia Medica. And that's kind of an esoteric book from the very late 1700s. And he told me that he actually held a copy of it in his hands at, I think it was the Harold B. Lee Library or a library that he found. And I was like, yeah, I have it, the bookmark saved on my computer. And he was stunned. This guy's in his, probably the late 50s, early 60s. He was stunned to realize that book had been uploaded on archive.org and that I had it bookmarked in my booklet already. And I had thumbed through the book just like he had, only he had thumbed through a physical copy 20 years prior before the internet was really a thing. Right. So like, there's just a fundamental difference of how information is acquired today, as opposed to how it was acquired when No Man Knows My History came out in the early 40s, right? As opposed to how it was acquired in the 80s. Like BYU experienced this whole underground uprising of people passing around these super esoteric and hidden documents that they would go and photocopy at the Harold B. Lee Library that the church had no idea they were copying, and then pass them around to all of their friends. And that's the realm that New Mormon history was born out of from the 60s and 70s. All of this was like the information can no longer be controlled, and the church is going to crumble under this cascade of information that it cannot control whatsoever.
I think
and it's beautiful to see.
Yeah. It is. And they really need to, I mean, this whole, well, we don't want to be called Mormon anymore. It's bullshit.
Well, fuck you. We're going to keep calling you Mormon because you can't control what we say.
Mormon. Yep. But, what's his face? Prophet Burns there. He should be really worried, because think of this. Scientology's newer. Scientology used to sue the fuck out of anybody who published their shit. I can find any of it anywhere I want now. Yep. In just a decade or two.
And I bet Scientology is bleeding members too right now, right? I mean,
yeah, they are.
Oh yeah. Oh, huge. And they're trying to cover it up too by, flying members into building openings. So it looks like there's more people that wanted to go and shit like that. Like just creepy ass cover up stuff. And they've got, sex abuse scandals going on right now too, as do the J-dubs, and I think it's great that this shit is getting uncovered. Hell because people have finally said, you know what, we don't deserve this. We deserve to be treated like human beings. We don't deserve to be mistreated or abused
or infantilized.
Exactly. And we deserve to be compensated and to be heard about what has happened. And
plus, I was telling my boss earlier today, going back to, digitizing information, I have copies of documents from the and 17th century.
Yep.
On church history and various other things. It's like 20 years ago, where I live now, I never would have gotten my hands on it. Now, when I lived in Buffalo, I might have, but where I live now, no way.
Yep.
Yep. And again, like the ease of because I love learning about all this fucked up shit from different religions. And so I can go on and find out virtually anything about any religion, whether they want me to know it or not, because there's going to be somebody somewhere who's got the info. Like, not when we did our Iglesia ni Cristo episode not long ago. They're the same kind of thing with Scientology. They don't allow anybody outside the church to see their materials, to know what their doctrine is, any of that. Within hours of the show we did with Joe, somebody who was recently had not quite left but was on their way out of the church responded with a link to their main church document in PDF. Just like, poof, oh, by the way, you might find this useful. And Joe was like, I've been looking for one of those for years, because he wants
anymore.
Yeah, absolutely not. And you won't be able to. None of you will be able to.
Yep.
So, Prophet Burnsy there, you better get.
He's not going to be around much longer. He can't possibly give a fuck right now.
Sure.
Right? He's living the high life. He is emeritus prophet status. He doesn't have to worry about giving revelations. He doesn't have to worry about all the bullshit that's going on. He doesn't have to do anything. He has to show up for the meetings and then collect a fat fucking paycheck. He's fine.
And probably read some shit that somebody else wrote for him.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. He doesn't write any of his own shit anymore. Like, that's the thing. And each prophet that gets in, you have to understand that they've been playing that shitty game their whole goddamn life. They have been striving and trying, and they made it to the goddamn throne, and now they just get to rest because it's a lifetime appointment, which creates a feeling of complacency. Like, oh, I don't have to give any, do any earth-shattering revelations. I just have to keep the church from completely falling the fuck apart. And then, every 6 months I have to give a couple of rousing speeches. That's all that they have to do, which it just allows the church to stagnate. It allows Mormonism to stagnate more and more and more. And
Mormon.
Mormonites, those damn fanatical Mormonites. It allows it to stagnate further and further. And the world is accelerating at a parabolic trajectory now. Like, they are so far behind now that they will only get further and further and further behind. And the acceleration of the way that the world is advancing now in the internet age will just further reveal how antiquated these old fucking fogies are. These octogenarians running the church, they are so incredibly irrelevant now. And the longer that the church progresses, the more that disparity will become apparent in everybody's mind. And the more that the millennials are going to leave, our generation are fucking done with the church. We're out. Fuck you guys.
Is there any of the apostles that are under like 75?
Yeah, I think the two newest ones are Bednar. I think he's like 61 or something. He's the youngest with the most seniority. So he's in like 20 years, he's going to be the prophet, I think.
Oh, in 20
And Bednar is the guy of fame who said there are no barking dog. He's the guy that famously said there are no homosexual members of the church. Right. So,
It's like the guy that said there's no gay people in Iran or whatever.
Yeah. Yep, exactly.
Dorgan or whatever his name is. Yeah.
I know two Mormons that are gay, so sorry, dude, you're wrong.
Yep.
Yeah.
Although I wouldn't call them practicing Mormons, but
yeah, well, hey, if they can claim them, they'll claim them. So
probably. I don't think they've officially.
What do they say the membership? Are they still trying to claim 12 million or some shit like that, or
they just claimed 16 million? Well, and the membership numbers, the whole story behind that is fascinating as hell too. So every year since I think like the 1960s, they report in general conference their membership numbers. They used to report their tithing statistics as well, but that went away in I think the 1990s. So since about the 60s, they've been reporting their statistics, all of the members, all of the total membership numbers, the stakes, the number of missionaries. This year, 2018, April 2018 was the first year that they just didn't report those numbers. And if you log into their own metrics, it's because their own metrics reveal that they're bleeding members.
Yep.
And they don't want to talk about that. They don't want to reveal that there might be a problem in Happy Town, because if you do, then you acknowledge that there's a turd in the punch bowl. Everybody stops drinking the goddamn punch.
Wow,
Well,
this is good.
I think what we're seeing with the Mormon Church, we're starting to see with the Catholic Church, with with the pedo scandal. But I think we're eventually going to see this bleed down to what people call mainstream Christianity and the smaller denominations, Lutherans, Methodists. The more and more this type of stuff comes out, the more information that's becoming available. And that's why some pundits are saying that the church overall is going to be dead in 20 years. I mean, it won't cease to exist. There's still going to be pockets, of course, but as an overall, and that's why I think we're seeing so much just vile rhetoric from the Reich, because they know they're dying. They know they're bleeding members, and people are not hip to this bullshit of the bathroom bills and all that crap. I mean,
Proposition 2.
yeah, Proposition 2 with the medical marijuana in Utah. I mean,
they fucked up royally with that.
Yeah, and it's just like these younger kids, and I deal with a lot of younger kids, especially here in town, and they're like, they could give two shits that I'm an atheist. They could give two shits that I'm gay. Most of them are, I know of 3 under the age of 25 are trying to determine if they want to transition or not.
Yeah.
30 years ago, the only person I knew of besides Christine Jorgensen, and the only reason that name popped up because I was doing a little bit of research for something I'm putting together, was Renee Richards. You didn't have. Now you have Chaz Bono, you have, Laverne Cox. I mean, you and I and Morgan, how many do we know just between the 3 of us?
Oh, good grief. I have so many trans friends now. I just, I love it. Absolutely love it.
Yeah, and it's like, I reached out to one of our mutual friends, the other day. I said, hey, I'm like totally clueless on this fucking shit.
Yeah.
But because I live in such a rural area, I'm trying to get information together to help, one of the kids here. I call them kids because they're kids. I mean, but.
And Morgan, that means your kid too, just so you know.
I know.
25
years old, young.
Oh, yeah. You should.
But yeah, it's just amazing. That's why I think, that's why the more we talk about the bullshit, not just
when Sam came out to me, I didn't have to sit there and go, where do I find a book? Where do I find somebody? I just went to my list of very capable, knowledgeable trans friends, picked some and went, oh, hi, stupid cis question. What do I do?
Exactly.
That's my favorite line. Oh, hi, stupid cis question.
I should start. I'm going to have to try to remember that one, because I know that's basically what I did to Trav the other day. It's like, stupid cis question, but it's like, I don't want, and I try very hard not to put out bad information. So I'm like, always, just talking about Mormon. We have Bryce here who like
and if Bryce isn't available, I do have other people, although we kind of partial to Bryce.
What did I ask you the other day? Oh, about the issue in
do we know any ex-Hindus? I'm like, I definitely know one, but if I post in this group, I can probably get 4 or 5 more.
Okay. It's like it's just the information that's out there. I mean, like we were talking earlier, you had mentioned Deb, it was you. I'm terrible. Like I'll say goodnight to Deb at like 1 o'clock, and 5 o'clock I'm like, I'm going to bed now.
Yep.
I end up on some stupid ass website.
She'll ping me like 3 hours later. Oh, here's something you might find. I'm like, I thought you were going to bed. Oh, yeah.
And when you're an information junkie, it's really, and that's why I think, having, like shows like we did last week. Yeah, it was a heady topic. Or today with
tonight, really, but it needs to be talked about. And you know what? The thing is, we can't be afraid to talk about the bad shit. We cannot.
And spending the proportional amounts of time on the issues that matter. Like we spent like the first 10-15 minutes bullshitting around about the name change, and then we spent the rest of the time talking about why the name change is happening. Because they're trying to cover shit up, and covering up ugly shit is much more important to talk about. Like it's a matter of keeping things in perspective, and sometimes it's hard to do, and sometimes it's not all that entertaining, but it needs to be talked about.
Well, I think it goes to something I was telling Deb even before we set up for this show, is that I found out today that the Roman Catholic bullshit is even more real to me now than it was 5 hours ago. I have a direct friend who is a victim, and I got pinged by another friend who said, and this is in my podunk little town here, folks, okay, 3,000 tops county population. Our local Catholic Church is part of the scandal. Not the current minister that's there, but prior priest before I even moved here. And she goes, I know you track this stuff. And she goes, I'm going to have to remove myself from Facebook just because, it's getting to be too much, because eventually it's going to come out who the local victims are. And she's like, keep doing what you're doing. And I think that's why it's important with like when Bryce does what he does concerning Mormonism, and Morgan, with Bi-Skeptical, I've only caught a couple episodes. Deb with Full Chronic, and then you got Trav, and you got Kaylee, and you got Riss, and you got, we could go down a list of all our podcasting friends, and every word we say that undermines, the religious dogma is important.
Yep. But I think we're about at the end of the evening, folks. So, Bryce, thank you so much for coming to join us. We really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for providing the platform. I want to talk about this issue as much as possible, because the more we harp on it, the more people calling missionaries. Log on Mormon.org, chat with them on your lunch break.
Yep.
Call them.
Absolutely.
Talk to them, because if they can't provide answers, and the more people that they have calling and saying, what the fuck is going on with these bishops' interviews, the more they're going to have to report that to their superiors. Their superiors have to report that to the Quorum of the 70s. The 70s information filters up to the Quorum of Apostles, and sooner or later they realize that there's some fucked up shit happening. And as a final capstone, Sam Young, the guy we've talked about, the head of the Protect LDS Children campaign, dude just held a hunger strike on Temple Square. Hunger strike for 23 days. 23 days. And he held it was Temple Side Chat. That was what it was called. It was this spotlight, in hoping that he just held an empty chair out on Temple Square, inviting each day in succession an apostle and a member of the presidency to come down and meet with him and to talk. And
nobody did they?
Nobody showed up. Nobody answered. No public statement in response to it. They responded to Sam Young obliquely, but they didn't actually respond to the hunger strike. He hunger striked for 23 days. To put that in perspective, Gandhi had a 21-day hunger strike. And that catalyzed the British government pulling out of India. So 2 more days beyond Gandhi's hunger strike, and we can't get the church to shift on this shit. Yeah, the more social pressure, the more shit that they catch for this, the better. They need to deal with these chickens are coming home to roost. They're going to have to deal with
sent a list of questions like Sam Young sent those old fuckers, and they don't have anything at all to say. That's beyond disgusting.
Not only that, the material. So the March,
Yeah.
we delivered a booklet with all of the compiled stories, those sacred stories from sacred children that are on protectldeschildren.org. Each one in its own booklet with an apostle and a member of the presidency's name on it. We delivered all of those books to the church's doorstep. And prior, the day before his hunger strike, the public statement that the church made in response to Sam Young starting the hunger strike, and they didn't, reference the hunger strike specifically. They just said, we have reviewed Sam Young's materials and we feel that further meetings with him are not necessary in order to communicate his point. So not only did they not meet with him, they slapped him in the goddamn face.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's all a matter of perspective. The more we can talk about this, the better. And once again, thanks for inviting me on to talk about it.
You're very welcome.
Kind of a heavy issue.
Very welcome. And folks, bandy the name Mormon around as much as humanly possible.
Hell yes. If you like goddamn Mormon church, not Mormons, Mormon church. Make the distinction, not the Mormon people. The Mormon church is the problem.
Yes, because Mormons are generally victims of said Mormon church.
Exactly. And they're my friends and family. Don't talk bad about my friends and family.
Yeah. But Mormon church, Mormon church, you
Damn
suck.
Right. Yep.
Big time. And do you tell everybody where they can find you and your shows and the Protect Mormon Kids and all that stuff?
Absolutely. Everything we talked about today is all on Protect LDS Children on their, protectldeschildren.org and their YouTube and Facebook and Twitter channels as well. You can find me. I host/co-host 3 podcasts. I'm on Naked Mormonism. That's my serial Mormon history podcast. And I also do Glassbox podcast and My Book of Mormon. You can find me on Twitter and Facebook at Naked Mormonism.
Awesome. And we'll have to put that protect. Everything else is in the description. We'll have to put in the Protect LDS Kids. And one distinction: a lot of the people involved in Protect LDS Kids are still practicing Mormons, are they not?
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
They're just concerned. Yep. There are even a number of active bishops who are signed on.
Good. See, there are good clergy out there.
Yes.
So for all you assholes that are like, you just talk about clergy like they're no. There are good clergy. They're just pitifully hard to find.
And yeah, a little underrepresented. Yeah.
Yes. Just a little bit. Yes. All right, Miss Morgan, where can we find you?
All right. Well, you can't find me on Twitter or Facebook anymore for now. Just deactivated those for at least a week.
That's okay.
Yeah, just a lot of stuff. But you can find me on Instagram. So that's Mostring. That's MOSTRING. And you can also catch me on The Bi-Skeptical with Tris Mamone. It comes out about every 2 weeks on iTunes, Spreaker, and Stitcher.
Awesome. Yeah, I think Tris kind of went to bed at some point because I don't see them anymore, but that's okay. We had a full house full of Christian trolls this evening. Not sure why, but whatever. Oh, I'm getting an echo all of a sudden. Anyway, Beth, where can we find you?
Easiest way is on Twitter.
That's where.
Yeah, you want to finish for me?
Yeah, she's at Dune 998, connects to her Facebook and everything in her blog, Havoc and Chaos. Facebook is Beth A. Hambridge. Otherwise, you get an old profile that she doesn't use and might have even deleted by now. I forget, and all of that. But she's gone robotic on us, so we'll just leave it at that. And of course, you can find me on Holy Crap, the vlogcast, which is Sunday mornings at 12:05 a.m. on YouTube, and you can find that at holycrapthevlogcast.com. We also discussed the Catholic Church fiasco this past Saturday. It got pretty heavy, but we covered a lot of good ground on that one too, so feel free to check that out. And of course, we'll be here next week. Not sure what, maybe thinking something a little more light. Yeah, because it's been a little heavy the last couple of weeks, so we'll see what we can come up with. And of course, if you want to hear me read the Quran, so you don't have to, you can find me at www.fullquranic.com. And yes, I think it's the first episode is where I talk about Muhammad's mother's magic glowing vagina. So, because, everybody's got to have one of those, right?
I got a mangina.
I know. I recently did a show with Bryce and about Islam and got to talking about that, and I kind of blew his mind with that.
Which is actually airing tomorrow, everybody, on Glassbox Podcast. Yep.
Oh, sweet. Well, there we go. Beth's sound went wonky, so she's dropped out for now. So we'll be back next week. Like I said, I think we'll look into doing something a little lighter. Back quickly. No, she's not working. That's okay. It's making me echo anyway. Just hang tight as you are. And so we'll close out with the human creed for mankind, and we'll see everybody next week as soon as I get my shit together here. Woo.
I know the truth and power of reason and of rational thinking, and I will use them to my advantage. I know the truth and power of educating myself and of expanding my intellectual boundaries, and I will educate myself. I know the truth and power of vanquishing ignorance, and I will do so whenever the opportunity presents itself. I know the truth and power of morality without supervision, and of true and accurate righteousness. I know the truth and power of obliterating tyranny, be it intellectual, emotional, or philosophical, and will work toward that goal whenever and however possible. I know the truth and power of human ingenuity. I know the truth and power of human compassion, and I will be mindful of the welfare of others. I know the truth and power of equality and fairness for all living things. I know the truth and power of the importance of our families, our friends, and our fellow men and women. I know the truth and power of human stewardship of our lands, our waters, and our skies, and I will try to act to preserve our environment. I know the truth and power of the sciences of mathematics, of physics, and of chemistry, and of the important role of these disciplines in understanding the workings of this cosmos. I know the truth and power of the rejection of all notions or beliefs that reside in the supernatural or the superstitious, and of those notions or beliefs that we are not supposed to be able to explain. And I know that these rejections are necessary for humankind's survival. I am a human being with a free mind, liberated from irrational influence and from unreasonable dogma.